Ready?
Yeah.
All right. Surprisingly, the gavel goes from the mayor's side. Because this is the organizational, I will call to order the organizational meeting of the Summit County Council for January 2025. We will wait until the beginning of the regular meeting for the pledge. So the first order of business is a roll call of council members.
Mr. Cox?
Present.
Mr. Schaefer?
Present.
Mrs. Jones? Present. Mr. Powell?
Present.
Mr. Stiles?
Present.
Mr. Wolf?
Present.
Mr. Almond?
Present.
All right, first order of business is election of the council president, consistent with our rules and Robert's rules. We will open the floor for nominations. Seconds are not necessary. So I will open the floor for nominations for president of council.
I'd like to nominate Kevin Powell for president of council.
All right, again, seconds are not necessary. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Roll call, please. And when you're called, you will announce the name of the person as you vote.
Mr. Cox?
Mr. Powell.
Mr. Schaefer?
Mr. Powell.
Mrs. Jones?
Mr. Powell.
Mr. Powell?
Mr. Powell.
Mr. Stiles?
Mr. Powell.
Mr. Wolf?
Mr. Powell.
Mr. Almond?
Mr. Powell.
All right, and with that, I will, since you already have one, I'll just ceremonially pass the ballot, the gavel to you, and it's all yours, Mr. Powell. Congratulations.
Thank you. Our next item would be the election of vice president. Do I have any nominations for vice president?
I'd like to nominate Gary Schaefer for vice president.
Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Kelly, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Cox?
Mr. Schaefer.
Mr. Schaefer?
Mr. Schaefer.
Mrs. Jones?
Mr. Schaefer.
Mr. Powell?
Mr. Schaefer?
Mr. Stiles?
Mr. Schaefer.
Mr. Wolf?
Mr. Schaefer.
Mr. Almond?
Mr. Schaefer.
Congratulations, Mr. Schaefer.
Thank you very much.
Next item is going to be council committee assignments. If everybody's okay, is everybody okay with the current committees they are sitting on? So Kelly, I don't know if you want to take these down or you want me to send them to you?
Just please send it.
Okay, yeah, it'll be the same ones that we currently have.
I mean, is it, nothing's changed from last year?
No, finance would be Mr. Costa as the chair, Mr. Stiles, Mr. Schaefer on that one. Streets and drainage would be Mr. Ullman with Mr. Stiles and Ms. Jones.
Okay,
Public safety would be Ms. Jones with Mr. Schaefer and Mr. Wolf.
okay,
Utilities would be Mr. Stiles would be the chair with Ms. Jones and Mr. Ullman. Laws and ordinances would be Mr. Wolf with Mr. Costa and Mr. Ullman.
perfect. That's exactly what I have.
Perfect, thank you. Adoption of the meeting dates for 2025. I don't know if we have that in front of us, just sticking with this first and third Wednesdays of the month.
First, good, third.
Yeah, I didn't see any conflicts with that.
Okay. All right,
Did
then,
you, thoughts about the summer schedule? In the past, you've deferred the first meetings in June and July.
I'm fine with that. Is everybody else fine with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll defer the first meetings of June and July. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Do you need a second on that? Yep. I'll second. Have a first and a second, Kelly?
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
All right. Next, we're going to roll into our public hearing. This is the City of Franklin public hearing to I call to order. It's at 6:03 p.m. This public hearing has been duly advertised within the Akron Beacon Journal for 2 consecutive weeks on December 19th, 2024, December 26th, 2024, as well as the City of New Franklin website. The public hearing notice read New Franklin City Council will hold a public hearing on Thursday, January 2nd, 2025 at 6 p.m. at the New Franklin City Hall, 5611 Manchester Road, New Franklin, Ohio 44319, to review and consider a conditional use permit on behalf of the city of New Franklin / Masons Cove LLC, 655 Latham Lane, New Franklin, Ohio 44319. The City of New Franklin Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously voted to recommend the approval of this request at the public hearing on November 21st, 2024. And it just goes on to say, this notice shall be published on December 19th, 2024, and December 26th, 2024, which I think those got maybe moved, so that's where we had the additional postings on the Akron Beacon Journal. So after reading that, I'd like to invite the applicant to address council with some of the details on the project.
I'm going to take that responsibility. The city is a co-applicant. I don't believe that we swore witnesses in these proceedings before. But in any event, Mr. Cantor was out of town. He was available the first meeting. He wasn't available for this one. I think what's pertinent, the issue's been well vetted. Many of council attended one or both of the public hearings before planning and zoning. Those who would oppose this have been well represented and well spoken. I believe their positions were considered fully. There was documentary evidence presented. There was conflicting, somewhat inconsistent evidence presented relative to noise levels and decibel readings, etc. I think what's important, a couple things that are significant. One is that the Tudor House, it's the use as an entertainment center is consistent with prior uses at the Tudor House. There was disagreement as to how frequent that was in the past, but without a question, there's been weddings held out at the Tudor House for a long, long time. There was some issue as to whether or not this was that the entertainment aspect was grandfathered in, but I think in fairness to all and an abundance of caution, we brought this to planning and zoning for a conditional use. There was discussion about noise, and that's the primary concern. I think it's extremely pertinent that what the activities at the Tudor House are consistent with the existing noise ordinance in New Franklin. And that's a noise ordinance that was considered twice by two different councils. And the second time around, there were some exemptions for entertainment venues that would require that discontinued by 10 p.m. In fact, at the Tudor House, it's even a little bit more strict than that. Sundays through Thursdays, the music stops at 9 p.m. Even though, according to our noise ordinance, it could go till 10 p.m. As you know, the agreement with Masons Cove has been extremely beneficial to the city as a whole. And I'm sensitive to the concerns of the folks who have opposed this. But we've had thousands of residents who have enjoyed the events that we carry over there now. We had none, now we have one, now we have 11. There's been, no exaggeration, millions of dollars of improvements already, with millions of dollars to come. On deck is the event center. And this conditional use, approval of this is particularly important to the event center. The funding, the capital for the event center comes from these events, the weddings down at the lakefront patio. And so while they're ready to proceed on construction of the $2 million event center, that can't go forward until this issue is resolved. I think it's extremely pertinent that the folks in our community that are charged with evaluating these issues, and that's our Planning and Zoning Commission, who were selected because of their expertise in these various areas. And they did a very thorough hearing, 2 different hearings. And they unanimously approved and recommended the conditional use. And I think council can can take a lot of encouragement from that. I think it's, this is the body that we charge with looking at our code and saying, does this fit as a conditional use? And unanimously, they approved it. Now, they approved it with some stipulations, some conditions. The first 7 were general conditions, and those are the same conditions that were approved for the Soric Farms. And they are all consistent with our zoning code. The 3 additional conditions were the result of concerns that were raised by folks who would oppose this. So first of all, there's a question about the event center itself, and one of the conditions is that there has to be a major site plan review for the event center. So what that facility is going to be, where it's going to be, and how it's going to be conducted, that's going to come right back to planning and zoning, separate and apart from this. Condition 2 was that a fence or a barrier should be installed to ensure security and privacy. And that's going to have to be worked out between the parties in a way that everybody is amenable, consistent with our zoning. And in fact, if it's not consistent with the zoning, then they'll have to come in. At one time, you might recall, there was a suggestion of a fence that was a little higher than what zoning would permit, and we had filed for a variance. We withdrew that, but one way or another, that's one of the conditions that they're suggesting. And then finally, as the sound amplification, and the Mason's Cove submitted a report from an expert who indicated that the sound levels, he didn't have any indication of sound levels over 90 decibels. There was testimony from the other side that oftentimes the numbers were higher. You saw a video, perhaps if you were here, when on a day where there was complaints about the noise being too loud, and in fact it came in around 50 decibels. We have no decibel level in the New Franklin zoning code. But in any event, as an additional condition, and upon questions from planning and zoning, it was determined that the sound amplification in the lakefront patio tent shall be limited to Mason's Cove LLC sound system, so that the DJs don't get to set up their own sound systems. And as you know, those are monitored, and they have been monitored in the past. And the requirement is that they be monitored with a sound limiter and a sound compressor. So with those additional conditions, and finally I'd say this, that it's my understanding that discussions are ongoing with those who would oppose this and with counsel for Mason's Cove to continue to minimize any inconvenience that those folks might have. So I expect that's going to happen regardless. I think they're on that path. But as far as the council's business today, I ask you to adopt the recommendations that were unanimously given to you by planning and zoning. There will be recourse. There are further options for those who would oppose this. If they can determine whether they want to litigate and appeal this decision, an administrative appeal through the Summit County courts. It's important that we have some closure on this so that we know whether that's going to happen or not. Because the event center is not going to go forward until this issue is resolved. I know nobody's trying to rush this through, but on the other hand, it's been well considered, and there's been a lot of discussion. So I would strongly urge council to proceed to adopt the recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Committee with those conditions that they suggest. Thank you.
At this point, I'm going to open up the floor for public comments. You would just address council with your name and address. And then,
Sure. Would you like to come up to the table?
absolutely.
Thank you, council members. I do have some written information I would like to submit here if I can. I think I have enough copies for everyone. Start then. Just by the way of introduction, my name is Steve Hobson. I'm an attorney here in Summit County in Akron. I represent a number of the property owners who live next door to the Tudor House. Mason's Cove specifically, I put it there in the first paragraph of the letter, but I'll just identify William and Amber Briggs. It sounds like it's on now. I'm sorry about that. William and Amber Briggs, they own 4768 Rooney Avenue. Jason and Jessica Evans, they own 4730 Rooney Avenue. David and Carol McCormish own 641 Latham Lane, the property that's right next door to the Mason's Cove, the Tudor House. James and Elizabeth Bolus, the owners of 4758 Rooney Avenue, and Paul and Mary McLeod, the owners of 4774 Rooney Avenue. Yeah, most of them were able to be here tonight. They may have a few things that they want to add. I would like to just respond to a couple of comments that Mayor Adams made. I do appreciate his comments, and we do understand the city's position. We understand this is a hard, difficult issue. There's a lot of factors at issue and involved here. We have, in fact, as he indicated, been trying hard to work with council for both Mason's Cove and council for the city. And we continue to try to do that. And I agree with Mayor Adamson. We would really like nothing more than to get some closure tonight so we could sort of bring this to an end. This has been going on for my clients for over 2 years now. I think, look, 3 years now, really 3 seasons that this has been happening. I know I personally got involved in the fall of 23 and sent letters to council for the city and council for Mason's Cove, and we've been in discussions. One of our concerns, though, is we tend to get, when we're dealing with multiple parties and entities, what tends to happen is everybody tends to push it off onto the next party to let them deal with the situation. And we're a little afraid that's sort of what's happening here is the last committee, the zoning commission, planning and zoning, was told that, you know, hey, this is being worked out between the parties, and so it's kind of going through. Now you're being told, hey, rely on what they've already done. It's being worked out between the parties. We're afraid if this gets through both entities, all of a sudden the parties don't have as much incentive to try to work with us any longer. We are not here to stop or to try to derail the request for the conditional use permit. Just to be clear about that, we understand the reality of the situation. We understand that these events are happening and probably going to continue to happen. But as Mayor Adamson said, our biggest concern is really with the sound issue. We have experienced, unfortunately, just sound at levels that just make it difficult, really, from the beginning, when these events began occurring at the volume and at the pace that they're happening now, to have real difficulty. My clients can't enjoy sitting out. Again, I'll try to speak up. My clients can't enjoy sitting in their backyards, sitting on the patios. They've invested in, they've got nice properties there along the lakefront. But because of the issues that have happened, it just has made it extremely frustrating for them. When you try this again, hopefully. Well, again, so. Speaking of sound issues, so I'm just messing with one to you. There, seems like it's back on now. So, but in any event, I guess a couple of things I want to say. The expert report that you heard testimony of, and you probably have a copy of, it was provided by Mason's Cove's counsel. We will tell you that report occurred, or that testing occurred over a period of 2 or 3 days. My clients have had testing going on there 24/7, basically the whole summer. And so we've tried to give you some information. The weekend that Mason's Cove had their tester out there recording the events, my clients were perfectly content with the volume of the levels at that time. As a matter of fact, we had spent a fair amount of time last spring and over the winter talking with, as I indicated earlier, Mason's Cove's council and council for the city, and they promised they were going to implement a bunch of different controls. And it seemed at the beginning of the summer that those things were making a real difference, and we were satisfied. We told that things seemed to have improved, and they were going along pretty well. We're not sure what happened, but somewhere along the line in midsummer, the volume just crept right back up, and it got back to the point where it just became a nuisance, quite honestly, for my clients. We termed this as a noise nuisance, and so
I would just point that out, that report that they had prepared was literally over a couple of events. They, of course, knew they were recording those events. Sound level was very fine, consistent with my clients. So one of the things you'll see in my letter that I sent to you, it says that frankly, if they would keep their sound levels consistent with what they have in that report, we would be okay with that. We would be done with this situation. And I'll get to that here in a moment, just a little bit more. We've been testing it. We have sound equipment out there 24/7 at 2 different locations. One's at the farmer's property, which is right next door. We have it at the property line. It's actually at their house, so it's not on the line. It's a little further back. They're the ones that share the border with the Tudor house, and then at the Evans house, which is further up the cove a little bit. And so what you'll see there attached is the attachment number 2. Attachment number 1 to the document I gave you shows just a recording of the events that occurred. You can see that this is certainly a 3-day-a-night operation, 5 days a night, several times during the summer, that my clients get to deal with, and they understand that. I know there was statements made earlier that this is consistent with what's always happened with Mason's Cove. Mr. McCormish, I think, can tell you his family's owned that property for decades next to it. They've never had an issue like this. What really became a problem is when Mason's Cove took over, and we understand the reasons they did, but when they moved the events down to the waterfront and built essentially, I call it a pseudo-permanent tent structure down there. So whereas they used to hold the events further back on the property, never had any problems with those, they've moved them right down to the edge of the waterfront, and there's just a complete different look. I know we had some aerials that we had provided. Unfortunately, I didn't include them with this one, but I know we submitted them with the planning commission, which I'm sure you have access to, and I'm sure I can find them here. But there's a comparison of just what the property looks like. There's this large tent structure that was put right on the waterfront, which has really created a number of the issues because of it being outdoors. Having said that, what we're really looking for tonight, to kind of cut to the chase, is really 2 things. One, we think this is a very good comparison to Historic Farms situation, which was approved by Planning and Zoning Commission back in earlier this summer. Same type of situation. They wanted to do a wedding venue. And for the life of us, we can't figure out why the determination at that point was that they had to keep their celebration activities inside the barn structure, and they had to keep their sound amplification equipment. Those were the additional conditions, 2 of the additional conditions that were imposed on the Historic Farms additional permit. We asked for those previously, and we're basically just kind of given different reasons, I guess, for why they thought this was a different situation. We're not sure that it is, other than the fact that we do understand, and you'll see in my letter I said we understand that at this point, there is no permanent structure, but we know that this application is being made because they want to build an event center. We're realistic. We understand that's not going to get built during the 25 season, but the goal, I know talking to the council, is that they would have it done by the end of 25. So what we're really asking for, so there's a couple things we're asking for. Number one is that the condition would be imposed on this conditional permit that once the event center gets constructed, that at that point in time, they would have to put their celebration activities and the sound equipment inside the event center. The same thing that they told Historic Farms. You have to do this because you're in a residential neighborhood. You got to put it inside the barn. We're just asking that there would be a condition, an additional condition that would say that has to be inside once the center has been completed. The second thing is really, okay, well, what do we do in the meantime? And again, like I said, we're practical. We understand that, there's going to be activities, as Mayor Adamson said, there's a lot of economic activity there happening that is going to go on in the 25 season. We understand that those things are going to continue to happen outside. What we're asking for is that there be some limitations on the sound levels that happen. A couple of things. Number one, like I said, their report, if they just follow their report says that at the fence line, which is the property line between the farmer's property and Tudor house, it says the sound levels were between 50 and 63 decibels 99% of the time. We're asking that you would impose 65 decibel level of 65 at the property line, which is more than what they're saying. They said at 60 feet out into the water, they said the decibels measured at 35 to 55 decibels. Well, that's great, but then they testified at the last hearing that they let it get up to 96 now before they do anything. Again, we don't of course, it's nice to have a report saying, hey, the sound's down here at this level, and you guys should all be willing to live with it. But this happened on one weekend, and they're right back to having, decibel levels much higher than that now. So we are asking that the decibel levels would be kept at 65 at the property line. My other basis for that is exactly the level of the Summit County noise ordinance, it's 65 decibel level. What I heard Mayor Adams say is that, there's a noise ordinance here, it's not due. The problem is, my clients have called and nobody says they can enforce it. They don't know what it means. There's nothing in the noise ordinance that gives them any sort of measurable objectivity that they can enforce it. And my clients have been told that, and they'll tell you this. So that seems to be a red herring to me to say, hey, they're complying with our noise ordinance. Well, they are when there's nothing to enforce. And my clients have literally been told that by the authorities that there's nothing for us to enforce here because there's no way to measure this. The third reason that we would like to put it at 65, and again, the Summit County noise ordinance is 65 up until the hours of, I think it's 9 o'clock at night, which is what we're asking for. I brought a copy of it if we need to take a look at it in more detail. We're asking that 65 decibel level be put there until 9 o'clock on weeknights and 10 o'clock on weekends, on Friday and Saturday, which, by the way, Mason's Cove has already been voluntarily doing, and we appreciate that. But there's nothing that requires them to do that tomorrow if you guys approve this. I mean, they can suddenly just change their mind and start, ramping it up on my clients. There was a case also, I'm just going to refer to the Angerman-Dura case that's referred to in my letter there that I gave you. That particular case, the court specifically found, it's quoted on page 4 there, that there was a noise nuisance situation that occurred. And I'm sorry. The quote's actually before that. The quote is down on the bottom of page 2. The court actually said that the noise levels were measured at the houses of several plaintiffs at the maximum range of 52.4 decibels to 72 decibels. And the plaintiff's other expert explained that the sound level was 65 decibels. It would be difficult for two people to carry on a conversation at a distance of 1 meter. Now, I've talked to the attorney on that case. That's a sound professor out of Rutgers University. There's a school of sound there that he brings in. He's a guy, the attorney's here in the locally over one county over, and testimony there, 65 decibels, it would be difficult for two people to carry on a conversation of a distance of 1 meter if it's above that. So again, that's probably the reason why the Summit County ordinance is what it is. I mean, this case arose, it's a 9th District case, which we know we're under the 9th District Court of Appeals here. So for those reasons, we're asking that there would be some reasonable restrictions put on. I guess I would mention lastly too, that as mentioned by Mayor Atkinson, the third condition that's stated in the recommendation by Planning and Zoning Commission specifically says, sound amplification in the lakefront patio shall be limited to Mason's Cove sound system and monitored with a sound limiter and sound compressor. That's fantastic, but I have no idea what that means. There's no limit anywhere here. So how can anybody objectively measure? It says it's to be monitored with a sound limiter and a sound compressor. But I would suggest that unless we give there some objective metrics as to what that actually means, neither my clients understand what it means, neither Mason's Cove understands what it means, nor would any officer who ever got called out for a noise complaint understand what that means. So the fact that it says it shall be limited to Mason's Cove sound system and monitored with a sound limiter and sound compressor, to me, there's only one logical conclusion. I mean, there needs to be one more statement there to say, and the level shall not be above X, because it's meaningless without that. So I would point you to that very language. The last thing I would just say, and this is more of a side note particularly for the McCormishes or my clients, is that the one condition you also mentioned was that the additional condition was to put a fence between the properties. Somehow the Planning Commission didn't understand there's already a fence there. There's a fence put there 10 years ago that was agreed to by the city of New Franklin and the McCormish's family members. So there's an existing fence there. We're not quite sure why that was made another condition. I know there's been talk about changing fences or other fences, and the McCormishes certainly preferred to keep the fence that was there, that was put there with the agreement of the city. More than 10 years ago, that exists already from that standpoint. So in a nutshell, we could be done tonight. My clients have indicated to you in this letter that they would accept a resolution if this council would simply put in those stipulations that that sound be limited at the property line to 65 decibels until 9 PM on weeknights and 10 PM on Fridays and Saturdays. And that once the event center gets built, that the sound simply get moved inside of the event center. And we understand it needs another season or more of just dealing with it, but they're prepared to do that. We can put some reasonable limitations on this. With that said, I'll just turn it over to see if any of my clients in particular have anything that they want to add, and I certainly can answer any questions if anybody has any questions. I guess I should have mentioned the second attachment there. The first one was a list of all the events. The second attachment are samples from our meter readings that we've had. From our expert, you'll see there at the beginning, it talks about certain peaks where it hit, upper 70s, 106 at one point in Cornishes, and then of course from the Evans property, which is further away, consistently in the mid-70s and 80s. Those are peak sounds, we recognize that. The documents after that show where the consistent volume seems to be, but again, it's good with it if it stayed under 65. I think we asked it to drop down to 50 after those times, 9 o'clock on weeknights and 10 o'clock on weekends. Thank you. Again, if you do have a question, I'll be happy to answer it. And I'll let my clients speak at this point.
I just got this. Okay. Not a lot of talk. Hello. Nobody wants to hear me that loud. Okay, by now you all know who I am. What you might not know is I'm the third generation on both sides of my family to live in New Franklin. Like many people in this community, I come from humble beginnings. I worked my butt off through high school and college so that I could buy my first rental property in New Franklin at 23 years old. I wanted to work hard enough so that I could live in the lake that taught me how to water ski, make me not afraid of fish, and holds every memory of the 4th of July since I can remember. I've made so many friends that I couldn't possibly ever want to live anywhere else. You see, my dreams have always been big, but the location of those dreams has never changed. I've always wanted to raise my family in the city that helped raise both. Okay. The past several years have forced me to ask myself a question that never occurs to me that I needed to be asking, and that is, does this city actually care about my well-being, or do I only care about the city's well-being? It's been a humbling and disappointing realization that the city I love so much might not want to prioritize the well-being of its citizens and instead focus solely on the economic impact it can make, regardless of who it affects along the way. I completely understand that the city is going through a lot of change right now, some of which is long past needed and some of which is very hard to watch. I understand that we need a long-term economic plan if we intend to survive as a city without raising the citizens' taxes even higher. I want you all to succeed in what you are doing, but I also want you to take seriously into consideration who it is affecting when you make these decisions. When I ran for city council, I knew that job would be difficult. There was an obligation to meet the needs of the city, but I felt what was lacking was our members taking into consideration the needs and wants of the constituents. And I understand it is a hard task and one that should not be taken lightly. So today you have a unique opportunity to listen and help your constituents and make a positive change without hurting the economic impact of the city at all. We're not asking for you to close the venue. We are not asking that you modify the full noise ordinance. We have never asked for any of those things. We're simply asking that you take what our council has offered and implement that alongside what you are doing. My husband and I have had to have some very difficult conversations about what we do if the city does not want to help its residents. The noise is affecting our mental health and our family's well-being. I wouldn't even be standing here telling you any of this if it was not unequivocally the case. I ask you to think about the role you can have in easing the burden that has been placed on all of the residents nearby. You have a lot of power to make some changes for everybody's benefit here. Thank you.
Good evening, council. Thank you for making time for us to do this with you tonight. My name is Dave McCormish. My wife and I have a property immediately next door to the Tudor House. That property's been in my family for over 80 years. My grandparents used to own, and they kind of started the Health Haven. Many of you know, if you're long-term residents, they sold that in '53 and kept a few acres and built a small little house right down on the lake. It's a place where I grew up swimming in the swimming pool in the backyard every week. My family grew up there, all of my cousins. Now it transferred from my grandparents to my aunt and uncle. My aunt and uncle sold it to us in 2011, so we've been 13-year owners on this already. And it has become a place of joy. My parents lived there from the years 2011 to 2018. It was just an absolutely great place for them to be. They now live over in Mayfair and Green, but they still come over all the time. We have kids that come flying from all around the country to spend time there. We have grandkids who come and love it. We have neighbors who come and watch solar eclipse. It has been a family event center. And it's really hard for us to see what's going on right now, and it has been. Just to give you an idea, sorry, I'm not gonna hand these out, I'll just show you real quickly, because these are the only ones I have. But the property, Mr. Hobson spoke earlier about a kind of a historical view of the property and what it looks like now. You can see that the events took place under a tent. Here's our house right here down by the lake. They took place up here in a tent that was much smaller than the tents we see now. It was ensconced by trees. Okay, that's perfect, thank you. Appreciate that. It was covered by trees. The trees absorbed the noise of weddings before. All during Al Bolus's administration, there were plenty of weddings, but they weren't 5 times a week. And the noise was certainly reasonable for us. We didn't have people wandering down by our property. And it was on a sand pad. It absorbed the noise. Now we have a concrete pad right down by the lake with a huge tent on top of it. And there's a retaining wall that reflects noise. So the sound dynamics have just changed immensely in the last 3 years since Mason's Hope has taken this over. Here's a picture. This is kind of a lakefront view before all this started happening. You can see up here all the trees that kept the noise in. We have a park-like setting next to us. Here's the fence that was agreed between my family and the city. And you can see how close we are. We have our sound measuring equipment right on the side of the house by the entry door, and that is, I think it's 15 feet from the fence line. So when we talk about our measurements, it's pretty indicative of what we're going through. And we have a patio here where we barbecue and we dine out all the time. We used to. We can't anymore because it's so loud we can't even sit and have a conversation with our family when we're sitting on that patio. Now, this picture is a couple years old, because it was right after the new building was built, but you can see the material difference in how that property looks compared to what it looked like for the 75 years plus that my family was in that property before it started getting changed. What you can't see is The Masons Cove and the city did plant some arborvitae along here, which has helped a little bit in the sightliness. It's had a limited impact probably on the noise, but as those grow bigger, hopefully there'll be more positive impact from that. And what you can see is the massive tent that's down here on the patio all the time. So it's been a substantially changed environment for us and our family. As Mr. Hobson has said, as Jessica said, we're not looking to close this thing down. Okay? And I think it's been teed up too many times in prior meetings that that's what we're trying to do, is that there's an economic benefit for the city that we're trying to kill. We're not. We know the city needs this. We want a reasonable, equitable decision to be made on how sound at our property line comes through and how it projects across the lake to the neighbors. Because none of us want to leave the area. And I think without tangible metrics, it's hard to know how a governing body can understand whether the right things are happening within their jurisdiction. And so we would seriously actually consider these decibels. And we think it's consistent with rulings and what Summit County has. Certainly New Franklin has jurisdiction for your own ordinances. But I think when we get to a zoning level, and especially when we get to a city council level, that's when you and others have the opportunity to apply judgment to rote legislation. And so we sincerely ask that you take a hard think through this with us. And we're willing to continue to talk with the city and with Masons Cove. But we can't go through another season like this. Thank you.
I think you can all hear me from here, if you don't mind. First of all, Happy New Year. And I want to say, I hope it's a good one. I know you've got a lot of things on your plate coming up, you too, Mayor. And I just want to say, the Tudor House, I go back into the 80s. I worked at that building a lot of times with the Kiwanis. My parents moved into my house, where I'm at right now, 1963. So I'll go back a good 60 years back now. It seems like we just gave this thing away. It's not a park anymore. It was supposed to be called the Franklin Park Civic Center. And we cut down a whole bunch of trees now just to get this in. And we did have some events there, but there were maybe 2-3 events a week. Not the volume that we have now. Not till 10 o'clock at night. The street lanes, by the way, close at 8 o'clock. And after that, it's whatever happens over there. You got to come over to my house anytime in the summertime. Welcome to you. Just knock on my door first. We're going to make that a Portage Lakes Historical Society museum, and that's gone now. We can't do that now. We're going to go ahead and make that the headquarters for the Portage Lakes Historical Society, and the new trail that we were trying to get to go with the big trail down below. Was supposed to meet at the Tudor House, and we were going to have that as our offices. And the place down at Canalways, down by Exchange Street, they were going to move into this building. I know a lot about this because I was in a lot of different county organizations, shared this and shared different events. So we were really working on that. To be able to get a $300,000 grant for a whole bunch of rocks for a wall, city wall, is, if the city could do that, we could have got a $150,000 grant for the roof and maybe some of the damage that we had down in the basement, but we never went to that. We took the first route out. This guy came up, and he's a smart man, talking about Tim Cantor, very smart. I would have done the same thing maybe, but maybe not this loud. And so that's where we're at now. Sometimes I think he just gave it away. You know, we shouldn't have done that the way it is. And you need to be thinking more about the residents, where you're moving them, or what are you gonna do to their lives, instead of just jumping in and do it. You shouldn't do that. And I know a lot of you weren't there to make the decision to go with this at that time. But that's what I'm talking about. Even the commission members, there was a couple of commission members that were not even residents of New Franklin that voted for this thing. I just had lunch with one of them the other day, and they told me that. So anyway, I'm just saying, it's not a park anymore. We had a lot of nice trees there. It was a beautiful place. But you can't walk there to maybe Monday and Tuesday. You can't do that anymore. It's done. Thank you very much for your time.
Do you have any more public comment?
Mr. Powell, if I could, I'd like to respond to a few of the issues that are raised. Sure. Oh, I'm sorry, there was more.
I'd just like to make one really quick point. I'm Jeff Angelou, I live in New Franklin. And I'm part of the Citizens Committee that, helps the events. And I think, I've seen most of you at the events that we've had, right? We went from having one event a year to having 11 events a year that are sometimes attended by thousands of residents in New Franklin, Ohio. To say that the rocks were, or whatever formative goals were saying, there's been nothing but improvements made to the Tudor House, the grounds, the community use. I'll just say, when they asked me to be on the committee, the first thing I asked them was, I'm only not signing up to be a wedding event planner. I want to know what we're going to do. What are we going to do with this as a community? It was about ready to go on. And I think we've been very, very successful with a lot of hardworking folks like Judy there, Brian, and a lot of folks in our community that have made this jewel for our community. It's way bigger than just some weddings. We have, movie nights on Tuesdays. We got bands on Tuesdays. We have, I think, up to 8 or 9 events now. Very well attended by the community. So just want to let everybody know that, this is a community jewel that was about ready to go under, and now it is a benefit to everyone in the community. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'm not sure what information, were all the exhibits from the hearing provided to council? Barry, do you know?
I don't believe
Well,
so.
all right. I don't know if you've got the expert's report. I'll give you a copy of this so you'll have it, but it's part of the record from the planning and zoning. Yeah, I'm not sure you have that. And just to point out that there's nothing in the report, and again, it's the only, if we're in a courtroom, that's the only report that's issued by an expert, other than there's been suggestions, but so that's an expert report. There's nothing in that report that indicates to me that the sound levels were only recorded over one specific weekend. I'm not going to quarrel with that fact. I don't know if they're right or wrong about that, but there's nothing in the report that suggests that it was just one limited weekend where they took sound readings. There's an issue about restricting venues or activities at the lakefront patio once the event center is built. I will tell you, we've had those discussions with Mason's Code from the beginning, and part of their business plan would require events, the ability at least to host an event at both locations. Have 2 events at the same center, which is not particularly unusual, as you know, for certain centers. In talking with Mr. Cantor, I understand that there's some folks who will book both and perhaps have the wedding down at the lake and the reception at the center. But we can't tell you that the business model would permit exclusion of events at the lakefront. So as you consider this, you should consider that the intention is to continue events at the lakefront patio. When we get to the issue of decibel readings, they're arbitrary, they're difficult to measure, and they're difficult to enforce. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be considered at all, but again, if you were here and you saw the video that we showed, at a point in time where it was suggested that the sound levels were offensive, we were seeing readings in the high 40s. And then as soon as somebody spoke, I think a phone went off, and all of a sudden they jumped up to 70 or so. So they are somewhat arbitrary, and they're difficult to enforce, and they're difficult to measure. The Summit County Code that's been referenced a number of times, decibel levels are one factor among many that law enforcement is to determine as to whether or not the sound noise is excessive. So it's not a per se that if you hit this level, you have violated the Summit County noise ordinance. The decibel reading is one factor of a handful of factors that could be considered. The 9th District case, it was something like a racetrack and in a residential neighborhood. And in that situation, I think that municipality was using the Summit County noise ordinance. We are not. New Franklin in 2005 passed their own noise ordinance, and they revisited that again in 2014, which I'll speak to in just a second. Sound travels at the lake. You know this if you've lived here your whole life. If you buy a house on the speed lanes, you're going to have noise from the speed lanes. You're going to have. I listen to Dano's music all summer long from my house. The previous tents that were next to the Tudor house, I would hear those regularly. I could hear the sound from there because sound travels across water. The state park we had. It so happens that members of the Planning and Zoning Commission included a couple of people who live on the lake to talk about all the noise that comes from the state park. From Dusty's, and over on the other side from the upper deck. That's part of living on the water, and sound does travel. So if you live on the lake, you do have to understand that there's going to be some noise. Back to the noise ordinance. This was 2014, and I believe you have a copy, and I'll give you another one. This was introduced by Mayor Bolus. It was at a period of time, at that point in time, where the sound issues were on the other part of the lake, over at the upper deck. And what council decided to do, and this is an entirely, pretty much largely different council than the previous noise ordinance. The section on sound amplifying devices, which is what we're talking about here. This section is not intended to apply between the hours of noon and 10 p.m. to entertainment facilities. So, consistent with our own noise ordinance, sound amplifying until 10 p.m. is exempt. It doesn't constitute a violation of our own noise ordinance. I would say this, and I think Attorney Hobson's point is well taken in terms of condition 3 that's suggested. I think that my take on planning and zoning, they were reluctant to try to impose a specific decibel number because they didn't feel they had perhaps the expertise to do that. What we heard, and I believe what Mr. Cantor has always indicated is that decibel meter in the tent is at 90, if I'm not mistaken, at 90 decibels. So what I would suggest as an additional condition to condition 3, that sound amplification in the lakefront patio shall be limited to Mason's Code LLC sound systems and monitored with a sound limiter sound compressor with sound not to exceed 90 decibels. And I think that that's a really good start. We'd be talking about 90 decibels in the tent. And then the sound, we certainly can assume that this number is going to be lower when we get to property, when we get to the lakefront and all the way clear across the lake. So I would suggest that addition to the condition, and I would ask that you proceed to adopt the recommendations with that additional amendment.
Any other public comment?
If I may, just briefly to respond, I mean, again, this is what we keep running into. You know, you're told to go ahead and pass it, you're told they're going to be reasonable, we're trying to work with them reasonably, but every time we try to put something, to actually impose something on there that can actually be measured, we get all this opposition. And really what that sounds like to us is
don't put any conditions on them, let them do whatever they're going to do. And yet we're told we should be reasonable, we should continue trying to work and work through it and work this out on our own. But nobody's willing to give us anything measurable to work this out for. So for some reason, all these same arguments didn't apply when Sword Farm asked for a permit. For some reason, the Sword Farm situation, they felt that the noise needed to be contained inside. I can't understand why, if this is just something everybody should be happy to live with or just should just get used to. Again, now all of a sudden, there's recognition that there's no way to measure what they've asked to be done, and we're not gonna put this somehow back in the tent and let it go up to 90 decibels? I mean, again, there's a reason why we picked 65, because it's consistent not only with what the county itself has done, but what the courts have done here that oversee this county, and what their own report. Again, Mayor Adamson pointed out that the report doesn't say when they measured it. The reason is because they only measured it over one weekend. If their counsel was here, he would be able to tell you that. Again, it was fine at that point in time. Their report doesn't show anything near 90 decibels. It says that it's between 52 and 70 is what their report is saying. So, look, we're asking for there to be an actual objective measurement that can be done at the property line. If you're determined you're going to do it at the tent, at the source, then we would ask it to be some number lower than 90. I mean, it's got to be something lower than that. Thank you for your time.
Can I just ask that we abide by the noise ordinance that we have passed? It doesn't put, it's been passed, it's been there for 20 years. It's been passed by 2 different councils. It applies to everybody on the lake. Like Mayor Adams says, I live right by the upper deck. I hear it all the time. I would just say that, why are we treating Tudor House, the events that we have, I was going to tell you, when we have the German dances down there for the Oktoberfest, it goes over 90. What are we going to do, shut down the whole thing and throw like 1,000, people out of the Oktoberfest on a Saturday afternoon? I would just ask that we are at Tudor House, for our events, that we're treated like every other event center, every other place out here, that it's already abiding by the noise ordinances that was put in place that have been there for the better part of 20 years now.
Often we hear about other events around the lake, whether it's dragon boat races or something in state park or speedboats. The problem with that false argument is all that happens during the daytime. Everything is done by 8 o'clock. And it goes quiet after that. I mean, we have data readings when there aren't events, how quiet it is at the lake. And you can see after the events how quiet it gets. So I think, one's entitled to their opinion about we should just live with our current noise ordinance, but that current noise ordinance isn't working with the conditions in place today. And legislation's not evergreen. It's made to be evaluated now and then. And this is a time when we think this legislation needs to be either evaluated or help us adopt something that works. A point of clarification, the 90 decibel limit, what Mr. Cantor has said is he asks them to do 95. He doesn't do anything at 90, but if it gets up to 96, then he tells them to turn it down. Well, that's a pretty broad range. And so to Mr. Hobson's point, it's not so much where it's measured at the source, it's the sound level and where it ends up on the property lines of the neighbors. And so that's why we're so adamant in asking that you evaluate a metric that brings it back to the property line. And I think if you look at the city of Greene and others, they measure it 10 feet from the property line. I think Summit County was a certain number of feet from the property line as well. So I think we have to take that into consideration.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, at this point, I'd like to open it up to conversation among council.
I'll throw a couple things out. I live close by the Tudor House, and I hear it. but it's not offensive to me. I don't live on the water, so I don't have that sound bouncing off the water. I understand that. But unfortunately, we have neighbors that don't always agree with our lifestyle or how we want to live. I've got a neighbor right across the street from me, and he uses a backpack leaf blower every single night. And it's always right around 6 o'clock when I want to sit on my front porch and enjoy the evening. And he's using it every single night for 20 leaves. Even if it's raining, he's out there. It is amazing. And, unfortunately, that's what I have to live with. It's frustrating at times. Sometimes I have to go to the back porch, sometimes I have to go inside. But that's my neighbor, that's what I have to deal with. I don't have dogs living next to me that come out in the yard and yap constantly. And dogs barking are, we know what a nuisance that could be. And fortunately, I don't have that. Other people do. Other people have neighbors with dogs that constantly make noise, and they have to deal with that. That's, unfortunately, there are pluses and minuses to every property. We could have a neighbor that wants to play opera as soon as they get home from work, and, loud and sing along and, whatever. We just deal with that. I mean, I don't have a neighbor that does that, but I'm saying that's a possibility. And so we have this property, the Tudor House, that has been spoken about, and has provided a lot of positive for the city, for the entire city. And we have the entire city taking advantage of it at different times. I agree that we should not allow free reign of whoever to do whatever and make noise. I don't experience that noise level. I sit down at the beach. My wife and I go down most evenings and enjoy a cocktail on our boat, just sitting there, and we can hear it, but it's not overpowering. It doesn't prevent conversation, anything like that. It's not constant boom, 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 boom. I think Mr. Cantor has done a great job of trying to help out, please the neighbors, and keep sounds down. He's invested a lot of money in sound equipment to contain it and to keep the volumes down. I think it's huge that he takes the step to have control of the sound. Doesn't allow the DJs in. You see in his contracts, the entertainment is not allowed to bring their own speakers in. He controls, and his staff controls the level of the sound there. When the numbers being thrown out is 65 at the property line. That's a conversation, 65. And to expect that it's going to be 65 for a wedding where people are, having fun with family and friends, and to expect that they're going to be, quiet, it's really unfair expectation. I think the conditional use as permit as the board has, as the commission has presented to us, I think it's a fair thing. I think that we will continue to see quality events going on there. Again, it's not craziness that goes on there. We don't have crazy things. These are people spending a lot of money at these events, and they don't want their event ruined. So they monitor themselves, but I hate for us to see us get too technical and too involved in this. So I'm in favor of the zoning commission recommendations.
I've got a few questions for Mr. Hobson. The sound measuring equipment, if you look at the differences between the two different locations, the Evans residence is further away from the Tudor House than the Cornish residence. But I see that there's a few instances here where the decibel readings are higher at the Evans residence than at the Cornish residence on the same day. How I'm not a sound guy, I'm not sure how that happens.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important to kind of look at the overall, trend of the sound on those days, which we try to show you the whole thing from, this time in the evening to this time in the evening, because, that's possible, maybe a boat came by or something that spiked it up,
So that's kind of leading to where I was.
Well, I can answer that. So it's not always the music. So you have 200 plus guests at these weddings. The bulk of them are actually screaming across the water, yelling, singing, whatever, directly at our home. So that's why you get the higher readings in some instances.
I just, not being a sound guy, I would kind of assume that the house right next door would have the same equal or maybe a higher number.
I think part of it is the direction, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in rare cases you'll see that, you're pointing out the anomaly. I think most of the time you'll see that the readings on our property are higher than on the Evans property. And I think what Jason Evans is saying is absolutely the cause of this is that you know the lay of the land very well. So here's the Tudor house, ours is right next door, and then Pinnacle Point curves out around. A lot of time, the consistent noise is coming straight across over to us. Later in the evening, the revelers are right on the shore, and they're not in a tent, and there's a lot of screaming and yelling and singing out there. It's very possible that some of that is being projected this way. So if I'm talking to you straight on, you hear it much more clearly than if I'm talking over this way. And I think that's the difference in the anomalies. But the general trend is it's probably 4 to 6 decibels higher at our location than the others.
Okay, that's all. I just noticed that of the 5 readings, 3 of them are higher at the Evans locations. That's why it just kind of jumped out to me.
I think if you look at the longer trend, that's probably not correct. I think almost all of them. Now, I realize at the front there was a summary given that just said the peak decibels, and that's why it looks that way. But if you look at the graphs there on the next pages, almost each one of them, the Evans house is at the top, and then the Flemish house is on the bottom. It's almost always about 5 decibels on average higher at the McCormick house than the Evans. But there are those individual spikes where it happens.
And do you have that in a digital format where it could be a little more clear? Because the way they're printed is just kind of hard to.
We could get that. Sure. I mean, I could send that.
For these 5 days.
Yeah.
Well, just even the graphs that they have on there.
Yeah,
If you look at the lines.
The data for the graphs for these 5 days, we can provide that.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, we can get that to you. I can get it to Mr. Sugarman if that's the best way to get it to you. I'm not sure what's the best way as far as that goes.
It's,
Correctly, but I want it.
Who took these readings?
These are from their reports.
Yeah.
So the residents took those readings?
No, we're working with a company called Safety Data
But
Resources.
we don't have, do we have a report from Safety Data?
We don't have a
information
final.
from it right here.
All right,
We
so
have a
that's what I
whole
want to be
summary.
clear on that. I think what you're looking at is not a report from an expert.
It is a report from an expert, Mr. Adamson. It's exactly
The
from.
content is.
It is from them,
Okay.
and that's what I say in the
All right,
letter.
all right,
It's
very good.
exactly from them. This is the data they gave us, that we provided.
And just to be clear, the sound measuring equipment, the dosimeters that we're using, we did not choose. Our expert chose them. We installed lock boxes on the side of our house, and we never touched them. The data cards are removed by our sound expert. When they remove those data cards, they recalibrate the equipment. So we've gone completely with the recommendations of the sound expert on how to best measure at these 2 locations.
And then there's another comment about the fence. The fence, if I recall, that's more like I don't say a wrought iron fence, but it has 0 sound dampening qualities. The planning commission, was the fence they were recommending more of like a board on board or something, more of a wall type fence?
They punted, they
They
did
did
not,
not say
they
anything.
did not define what it needed to be. They punted to, well, the parties can talk about it. And if we talk about it, we've tried to reach out to opposing counsel. There's been minimal feedback from them. But we have some recommendations on what they might be able to do. But having a 6 or 9 foot fence immediately along, solid fence immediately along the property line, this is not a livable condition for us. I mean, It's unsightly. It will completely block our views of the greenery of the lake, and it will have de minimis impact on sound buffering. There is a fence there. If they want to put a higher fence further up and then take it down along the lane they've created inside their tree barrier, that probably would be fine. And if that would help, then we'd be all for that. But for them to suggest putting a fence right along the property does nothing for us. The other thing that goes along with that, Mr. Powell, is that we've had, Mr. Cox said, there haven't been any problems. Well, we know police have been called in from other cities to help with events there before. We've had trespassers on our property where we've had to call the police. We've had people try and enter our house. Luckily, when Officer Hitchens or some of the other officers are there, they can look right over that wrought iron fence and see if someone's on our property now. And they help us out immediately. If there's a 6 to 9 foot fence going along that property, they won't be able to see a thing going on over there. And as everyone knows, down by the lake, you can walk right around the fence.
I'm not aware of any police reports relative to attempted burglaries at that residence, but if they exist, I suppose we could find those.
Didn't call it in as an
Oh,
attempted burglary. We called the police, and they went over and found the person at the wedding party who had tried to enter and had to talk with them.
Relative to the fence, what was discussed and what the city would do, since they're asking for, the planning and zoning suggested a fence for privacy and for security. At a minimum, the city will install a fence consistent with the code. In other words, what any landowner is permitted to install. But the intention is to have conversations with the neighbors and say, listen, what would work best for you? But so we can accomplish this. It's not an arbitrary unknown. Absent any agreement between the parties, we'll put up what the code permits as a fence to satisfy that condition. And I think that what we've talked about is to try to do something that's, we certainly would work with those folks and perhaps have some trees first and then a fence, but one way or another. So that is a provision that we can comply with.
I can agree, we have been trying to talk with Basis Codes Council about that.
So right now, the trees are about, 20 feet off the property line?
That's probably about right. So 20 feet off the property line into the Tudor House property, and which would put us like 30, 35 feet from where we sit and try and have our dinners and have our barbecue.
It sounds like the issue with the fence is the aesthetics of it.
Certainly the aesthetics, yeah. It would be horrible. It would devalue our land immensely. It would be an unlivable property with a fence right along there. And I can't think, I'm sure there is, but I can't think of one other property around the lakes where someone's put up a solid fence immediately on their neighbor right down to the lakefront. It's not how we're designed around here.
Even though it sounds like, I'm sorry, Mr. Schaefer.
I don't think the code will allow a fence to go down to the lake.
No.
The problem, Mr. Schaefer, is that historically, the property that we own has been zoned R or R1 and not RL. So it's not lakefront. All the other properties around the lake are zoned RL. And so you're right, you can't take a high fence. It has to be less than 4 feet as it goes down. Unfortunately, we have a historical condition that would allow the city to put in a much higher fence right down to the lake.
As I was going to say, I'm not trying to be argumentative, even though it sounds that way. The one thing you can take, you take a look at the property. Everything's first class. The last thing in the world that's going to happen is the installation of an unsightly fence. That doesn't benefit anybody. If it's unsightly on their side, it's going to be unsightly on the Tudor House side. Everything that Mr. Cantor has done has been really first class. And I think we can count on Basis Code in conjunction with the city that, when the fence goes up, it's going to be something that's sightly.
I think if we can talk about that, that would be very helpful, because it's not a truism that it would be any fence that put up wouldn't be unsightly to the Tudor House. They planted those arborvitae. If you put a fence in between on our property line, no one from the Tudor House would see that fence because they'd see the arborvitae, but we have it smack in our face.
And if there were to be some issues on limiting the height stuff, that could be a variance process.
They have to come in for a variance.
Okay. I mean, we would do a variance ourselves.
Absolutely.
Okay. Any other comments or?
Yeah, I have a question, Mr. Evans. You mentioned that it's not necessarily the music, it's 200 people screaming it. So this isn't like an amplification electronic thing.
It's a combination of everything.
Okay, because I'm thinking, that sounds to me that you don't want to do events there because you can't have people expressing themselves. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just heard that.
No,
Define that.
actually, okay.
I'm just gonna say, from what I've understood, part of the issue is just when some of the DJ services start to get people ramped up.
Everybody's screaming or something like that.
But they're being loud on the sound equipment to try to get the crowd excited.
Yeah.
And
And that's where it would be helpful to have, again, some objective measurement. And Mr. Cantor has said, as Mayor Adamson indicated, he has said that he said that he's noticed various numbers, but he says at the source, they try to measure, and they have this measuring at 90. The problem is, even he doesn't enforce it. I mean, like they testified earlier, he said last hearing, he kind of lets it get up to 96. If we could put something hard and fast, that at least there, that he knows he's supposed to be enforcing, I guess, maybe he would be more serious about keeping it at 90. Again, we're not trying to stop all of this. I mean, everybody's talking about different events that's happening, and nobody's complaining about stuff that's happening during the daytime. It's the nighttime weddings that go on for hours and evenings.
So I see the movie night. The movie night is like sort of our civic thing, and it's exceeded the 65.
We just picked a random, we tried to be fair, and just picked random things.
So I mean, that would shut that down, right?
Well, he said himself that.
Oh, that's the peak number?
Mr. Hudson himself said that's the peak number, so he said that could be. Like you said, that could be a vote going back.
Yeah, that could have been
So
a
what you wanna
nominal.
look
If you
at
look at
is
the main,
the
if you look at the main.
I mean, are the weddings and that, or our civic events, our 11 events at the city, that those are the ones I've been to. I've done, nobody likes me, I've been in weddings. You know, so I've only been there as a participant in,
You seem like you'd be the life of the party.
no. So I just want to know, are any of our events that we put on in, let's say this year, since that's,
So we measured, if you take a look, I think one of them is a movie night.
yeah, I saw
It's
that.
it's the one page, it's the first one after the picture of the movie night. And you look, most of the sound is coming in at the top residence, which is the Evans residence. I mean, most of that is ranging, I mean, it gets up a little above 60. I mean, later in the evening, about 9:45, they're like about 10:20, but for the most part, that's down. I mean, if you look at that consistently, there's not a huge issue there. Look at the McCormick residence, I mean, it's ranging, it looks to me like between about 60 and 65 for the most part of that night.
But I'm just saying, our movie night, just correct me if I'm wrong, it would be in violation of what you're proposing.
It would, and
Okay,
it could be turned down and still be a great movie night. And you know what, I live over 4 or 5 movie nights a summer. That's not the big problem, and it should be controlled, but it's the other 4 nights or 5 nights when there's a wedding and yelling and screaming and sound amplification. That's where we need some better controls.
And I'm just not prepared to say, hey, 65 is right. I know some county has a thing, but we're talking about 90 inside and 65. Now we're getting into numbers. I don't know what 100 decibels versus 65 decibels is. I'm just saying for you guys, I'll abstain or whatever has to happen, but this is a serious issue. I mean, this ain't. Then I have one other question. I don't know for whose parties, because I heard it like, well, hey, we're working on it. This is probably, tell me if I'm misinterpreting, probably going to the court, and the court's gonna have to decide something. I mean, what compels me to want to step into it right now? Like, I almost want, like you guys deal with it. But, I mean, tell me.
I think that's part of their concern is passing the buck. And I'm not suggesting that's what you do. Either side could file an administrative appeal based upon the action of council. So if you adopt the recommendations, the opponents could file an administrative appeal. If you deny the recommendations, the proponents could appeal that, and then it would proceed through the courts. So,
Thank you.
Part of the reason we're here is because we're trying to avoid.
No, I think we all
We
want
really just want,
this to be
we
resolved.
want something concrete, I guess, that we can both understand. Right now, we just have these loose things that we have all this room for disagreement on because they're just so loose. I mean, even, well, I won't repeat, but that's the problem. So we're asking for let's put something, I mean, Mr. Cantor has said over and over that he keeps it at 90. Mr. Adamson, and the applicant has said, let's put it at 90. If nothing else, put that at 90 at the source and let's see how it works. I mean, we have nothing at this point. Everything.
So you would concede that you'd be okay with 90?
I don't know what to tell you other than it's better than what we have right at the moment.
No. So it sounds like,
At the source, Dave. That's what you're.
I'm fine with having it at 90 as long as it's also measured fence at 65. Two measures is very easy to do.
so you're really not happy with 90? You would want
I
it
think
to
you're
be
saying
two
you don't like
measures?
You know what, I don't know what it's gonna be at the line at 90. That's why I'm focused on 65 as a resident and have to hear this. So for me to say, yeah, 90's great, I may be shooting myself in the foot.
So, Mr. Hobson, the Angerman Burek case, was that tried for a area under Summit County's noise ordinance, or was it an area under a different noise ordinance?
It was actually in Wayne County. It wasn't under any ordinance. It was a noise nuisance case. The court was looking solely at whether a noise nuisance was occurring to the property owners. Now, Wayne County is, if you may or may not know, but the 9th District Court of Appeals oversees Summit, Wayne, Lorraine, and Medina. It went up to Summit County, or it went up to the 9th District Court of Appeals, and in a noise nuisance case, I quote, they found that a noise nuisance was occurring. And I used that because that was one objective item out of that case. Now, noise nuisances, the courts look at factors. They look at a number of things, and well, I used that because there was an objective item, because the court specifically said this was an objective thing that they could look at, and they said, hey, we had a sound expert who testified that decibels above 65 interrupts a normal conversation. So our contention is if our clients are sitting, they can't enjoy the back patio or can't enjoy the back deck with their friends or family, because if it's above 65, then they can't really have a normal conversation at that level. If it's below that, theoretically they should be able to. So that's why we picked that. And again, not just that reason, but because Mr. Cantor's report said, hey, we never measured any time when it was above 63. I mean, I said, okay, well, we'll give you 2 more decibels. If that's what your report says, and you can keep it at that level. And again, I can't underscore enough, until about the beginning of July, they had kept all of that noise down. We had a lot of heavy discussions in the spring, over the winter, spring, early summer, and that noise level stayed down. And we literally had a discussion of like around July 4th or after July 4th, and we were all talking and saying, yeah, progress is being made, and look, this is really good. And then all of a sudden, it went back up. And my clients were complaining again to me, going, we don't know what's happening. Why is this changing?
So a couple things here. The case that you cited in here, what kind of activities was
It was a motor track that was put into, I don't know if it was a dirt bike, I don't know what it was, but the sound level was the sound level. And you heard, they were saying 52 to 72 were the highest numbers they heard, but it was in a residential area, and there was some sort of a track put in somewhere nearby.
Okay.
As we're talking about decibel readings and the 90 over 65, et cetera, it's been mentioned that Mr. Cantor doesn't do anything until it gets to 96. Well, as part of the contract for the entertainers and the Tudor House, one paragraph on sound levels. Sound levels from speakers or music playback or mics must not exceed 90 decibels. If at any time during your performance the max value is exceeded, you will be warned and must immediately turn down the volume. There will not be a second warning. Should levels go to the maximum allowed a second time, or if levels go above 96 before a warning, Basis Code will decrease the master output of our system to remedy the issue for the remainder of the event. We also ask the entertainer not to encourage crowd screaming if the levels are exceeding 90 decibel limit. Anyone not adhering to our sound monitoring system will not be permitted to perform at the Tudor House again. for future events. So there's things in place in the contract.
We talked to them directly about, they gave that contract in the spring, and that's why I said these were the measures that they said they were taking, all this sound equipment, the expensive equipment that they were taking to put in place, and we really felt like we had gotten there. Somehow halfway through the summer it worked, and then the second half of the summer it didn't work, and we just don't know. We have some suspicions but we don't know why that changed, other than they're letting the sound volume go up. Again, so I guess in some respects, if you put the 90 in, you're not doing anything different than what his contract is telling the people that come there that they have to do already. They're already telling them contractually, but the problem is, he testified at the last hearing, he wasn't really enforcing that. They were letting them get up to 96. That's why I said it. Put it at 90 and we'll see how it goes. I mean, we don't want to be here. My clients don't want to be spending money on me, quite honestly. And if it goes away, it goes away. They'll be happy.
So if the venue was doing the same practices that they were doing prior to that mid-July, is that a level that would be acceptable to you guys?
They all told me it was.
I think only if we could measure it at the, if it was as quiet at our property as it had been then, yes. And I have to go back and look at the data and see what the decibel readings we were seeing on our decimeter was. But again, this is why I can't get focused on just one reading at the source at 90. It really needs to be what it ends up at over on our property.
Well, and his contract says one thing, but we're not really sure what actually happens, like under the tent. Either the first part of the summer or the second part of the summer. We're not really sure what's going on. I mean, we can't verify that's what they're actually doing. We can only verify what's happening at our property.
A couple points, if I may. One, again, when you get to the property line, at least the 90 in the tent, if you make that condition, that's observable, it's easy to document, it's up on the screen. At least it's something that's objective and not necessarily subjective. When you get to the property line, as we've seen, we saw the sound meter go from 49 to 65 because the phone rang. And so when we're trying to figure out what that is at the property line, it really becomes more ambiguous. And finally, in terms of what the court looked at in the Wayne County case, Mr. Hobson, of course, is correct. They didn't have a noise ordinance to evaluate by. In this situation, were it ever to be before a court for review, there is a noise ordinance. And the community, this was passed by council. It has been in place for 11 years, undisturbed. And according to the noise ordinance that's been in place for 11 years, not only is there no sound, no decibel reading, this venue is exempt entirely from noon until 10 p.m. So certainly, when we're talking to the court as to whether it's a nuisance, I mean, this is what this ordinance is about, and it exempts these. And why does it do that? Well, because it's the Portage Lakes, and apparently there was a feeling that these types of venues are important to the community, they're important to the livelihood, they're important to the well-being of the community, and that's why they're exempt. So I think that's a heavy tool in the event it ever reaches any type of judicial review.
Mr. Bowles has put his hand up about 4 times.
Okay. All right, give me just a second. The noise ordinance you just cited was from 14?
Yeah.
Wasn't there a revision in 19?
It had to do with the
There's
trucks.
some stuff that added.
Yeah,
So
but they didn't change this, you're right. They looked at it
Okay.
again
So I'm
in
just
19.
asking, was there anything changed at that time on it? It was just
No,
the idling provisions? Okay.
exactly.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes, that legislation was, once a year event, twice a year event, things like people want to have a big party. Like I'm telling you. I mean, his clam bake is a fantastic thing every year over at Dusty's, and it's outside. And nobody complains about that. And let me say, Mr. Cox, I gotta say that why don't you tell your buddy to go ahead and start his leaf blower around 9:30 instead of 6 o'clock. It'd be a big difference. It means a lot. And Paul, we made that legislation because I made an agreement with all the bartenders. I used to go there all the time, or the bar owners, and I used to hit all those places, that they would go ahead and cut it off, outside music now at 8:30.
10 o'clock.
Just stop at 8:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30. And they have, ever since then. I don't think, is Holly still doing things outside? Dano's?
10 o'clock.
Outside.
Yeah, I mean, this was resolved. We had residents in the neighborhood of the upper deck who were upset. And that's how this happened. And that's why they were exempted. But, they chose 10 o'clock. Council chose 10 o'clock as a reasonable time for an entertainment venue to stop the sound amplification outside.
Council ought to come up with the regular legislation, and somebody ought to introduce that for a decibel limit in this town. Nobody else has one. I don't even know if Barberton has.
Green does.
It's gonna happen again.
And just to go back to the decibels for a second, I think it's a little disingenuous to say that it's a subjective measurement at a fence line. You could put in the equipment to measure it. Mr. Adamson, Mayor Adamson, is referencing when he talks about something that was at 40 and it went up. That was Officer Hitchen over at the Evanses with a handheld dosimeter, and it jumped up on the video and when they were talking. And at the time, it was 40. Before that, the sound goes up and down. And we know, and if you look at our charts, it goes up and down. But it's measurable, and it can be brought down a little bit and be livable. But let's not kid ourselves in it's subjective. It's just as easy to measure it there as it is at the exits.
Mr. Angeli?
Just a couple of points. I've heard a lot of conjecture about why or what, the noise ordinance was about. It was a long time ago. We have a noise ordinance. If we're going to take decibel readings, I mean, we're going to take it up by my house, by the upper deck, which I hear all the time and I'm okay with it. Are we going to do it at I'm going to do it at the pickleball courts down there behind the middle school, where they were hooting and hollering, having fun playing pickleball. Are we going to do it at the high school football games? I mean, how far are we going to take this? We have to understand we live in a community, in a community, especially on the lakes, that is a very active community. So we have a lot of fun out here, and it gets noisy. As far as you could put a decibel reader on my house for the upper deck, because when the boats come by through the channel with their music blaring, of course the decibel reading at my house is going to go up. It's got nothing to do with the upper deck all night long. West Reservoir. I lived there. I knew it when I bought there. Actually, I didn't know it was going to be that bad when I bought there. But I learned to live with it because this is on 42 lakes. We're getting into this whole talk about why we have an ordinance, or what was the original thing about it. The fact of the matter is we have an ordinance. It is very subjective on how you're going to, if you even can, measure this at someone's property line or if the tent, boat goes by, it spikes up and they shut everything down. I mean, we need to kind of think about what we're talking about here and how can we really effectively do this. I would challenge to say that would be a very, very tall order. And it would be, again, you put one on my house, it's going to spike all day and all night long because of things other than the upper deck.
Yes, in response to that, I would simply say it is the Tudor House that's asking for the conditional use. You have the right to put conditions on it. The Tudor House says they have all this expensive equipment to control these things. As a matter of fact, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended that they have a sound compressor on there, a sound limiter on there. Again, make that mean something. I mean, they felt that it needed to mean something, but they apparently kind of passed the buck to you guys to figure out what that means because they didn't really put anything with it other than to say they need to do this. So that's all we're asking. I mean, they have the equipment to do it. We know they can turn it down. They told us they can turn it down, and they proved to us they can turn it down. It's just a question of right now they don't have to turn it down because there's nothing telling them they have to.
I looked into the sound limiting devices, and I think it's more of an electronic device that goes on there, and it clips the upper and lower parts of the sound spectrum, which actually funnels it, and then I think it kind of gets louder if you, I don't know that it really suppresses the sound like the name indicates. But that's just something I think we need to look at.
Just a couple of comments here. I'm listening to everybody. I appreciate all the input from both sides. And I'm no sound expert by any means. But I live over by the high school. And I know on certain nights, where I live, I can hear the football game or the soccer game. And if the wind's blowing the other direction, I can't. So I'm wondering, even if we put a 65 or a 90 out there, it's gonna make the sound different depending on what night it is, which way the wind's blowing. Maybe even how much dew is in the air and how the sound carries through the air. So, you know, I think we need to make sure that Mr. Cantor is abiding by his contract with what he does with the sound people, turning it down if they hit those marks, and being held accountable for that. And I think putting the fence up and getting something that both sides are agreeable to is a good thing. And I think one of the things we could definitely say is whatever landscaping we put on the Tudor House side, we put on their side, so they're looking at the same thing that's on the Tudor House side, so nobody can say, well, your side looks better than mine. I think those would be easy, agreeable recommendations that everybody can live by. And we don't put it 3 foot from the current fence, we put it up by that road that they got done. I think that's what was talked about in the past anyhow.
Judy Williams. I just have one question. If we set a decimal limit at 90, when they announce the bride and groom and everybody yells, yay, congratulations, and that raises the decimals, is that going to affect a wedding? Is it going to be closed down because of that?
That's one of the things I think I've got a question about that we're not going to get the answer to here. Is there a way to put a decibel reading measuring device on the actual projection equipment and not necessarily the tent? Because I think that changes the whole dynamic of what we're trying to do here. You know, people, you can only control people to a certain point, whether it's at the state park, whether it's at Dano's, or whether it's at the Tudor House. You can suggest what you want them to do, but they're not necessarily always going to follow what you're asking them to do. But is there a way we can put some kind of limiter, maybe that's what that sound limiter is they're talking about, where the amplification devices will only limit to a certain point. And that's where you get your control under the sound. And maybe there's an understanding that comes out of this where we're controlling the amplification noise and not necessarily the crowd noise.
I have a question. How many times have the two parties met since the zoning, planning and zoning advised that?
Well, part of the issues, we've had the holidays, but we, as far as I've talked to your counsel, Attorney Sugarman, on the phone, at least one time we had a pretty extensive conversation. And with Mason's Codes counsel, we've swapped phone calls back and forth. We've actually swapped emails and phone calls, but I have to confess we've not connected because of just the timing of the holidays and everything, so.
It sounds like there's some things that can be done that makes this agreeable to everybody. I think it's just, you have to have some discussions. Do you know when Mr. Cantor is going to be back from his?
Oh, he'd be available at the next meeting.
I mean, will he be back?
Oh, he'll be back. I believe he'll be back sooner than that. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from council?
So we're gonna be able to vote on this tonight, subject to a couple of things being done in the future, such as a design of a fence and maybe a decibel mark, or are we pushing this off until a future date?
We're gonna have to push it off.
If
Just too
we
many
hold
questions.
if we hold it to the next meeting, that gives us time to have some discussions.
And make sure that you guys can get together, because that's important.
Well, I think there's a lot of discussion we can have on the fence. I don't know why in the recommendation it didn't say and instead of or. Right now it says fence or barrier of some sort. I don't know why it doesn't say both, fence and barrier. It gives you that double protection there.
I don't know either, but if we push it off to the next meeting, will we be able to, it would have to be another public hearing, would we be able
That'll
to?
be a continuance of the public hearing.
Would we have to advertise that, or that continuance, or?
I think that we did the same thing with the zoning meetings where it was continuous. We didn't have to re-advertise it.
So would we have enough time for the next meeting? Within 2 weeks, we would be able to advertise?
I don't think we have to advertise.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm asking,
Yeah.
do we have to advertise or not, in the newspaper? I don't know the answer to that.
For zoning,
I suppose we could stipulate.
well, first, what we've done with our past zoning meetings, we continued it and we didn't re-advertise. It was stated at the meeting that was continued.
We would be content to come back and just, there's a meeting about formality of, notice, if we know it's gonna be at the next meeting, so.
I also would want to know, like, how you guys see that being policed, whereas, like you said, somebody applauded for Mr. and Mrs. Evans. Is that it? Boom, bring the police in, carry out help, or is it, like, does that recording device give you like an average over a 10-minute period where it would just?
It records every second.
Okay, but.
All the time. And so to answer your question, I think, if I understand correctly, I mean, part of it, I think, is obviously, from our perspective, is to give an actual, a point for Mr. Cantor to say, okay, this is it. And again, maybe he throws the blame to his constituents back on the council and say, hey, you gotta have the 90 decibels in the contract because that's what the city requires. We just want that to be enforced. I believe that there's an officer usually there at the functions. I mean, and I think that
He's an off-duty, right?
Yeah,
He
and
would
I
be
think
by
there's
the
actually a
city.
meter that shows the number, I believe, it's got an actual screen on it. That's a speculation by me, I haven't seen it.
To that
but I
point,
think based on my
Mike
conversation-
Hitchens has come to our fence, talked to me, and said, I'm gonna go stand by the table. And he has said, I have stood by that table for the last half hour to make sure they turned it down. And
So they're kind of doing
they know when it's loud, and they can, there's a digital screen and they can see it too. But that, just because they can see the digital screen doesn't mean that the DJs always turn it down. Until they're asked by the officer to do so.
So again, I think it's part of the idea is it just gives all sides some objective thing to kind of strive for, I guess, to see that it's actually, happening. And, hopefully if it sets and it takes everybody, just then that just becomes a mistake. Everybody doing
Point
it.
of clarification, your contention is, because I'll do it myself, Mr. Cantor, that up until July of 2024, you guys don't have a complaint, things were going beautifully.
Let's clarify that, yeah. Last year was horrible.
2024.
2023. Oh, yeah, here we are, 2023.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 years ago.
I've been in office since January of 2024, so last year.
So 2023 was very loud.
Okay.
The first part of 2024, so starting in May
Till
June, May and June were, maybe the first part of July was reasonable, and then it started ramping up.
And I will tell you, I've talked to their council, he and I have talked at length about that. We've thought everything from, what somebody mentioned earlier, like just the air quality, the density, you would almost think it'd be the opposite. The air is heavier in the summertime than it would be in. We don't have any explanation for.
But it was just, no complaints until mid-July.
We felt like it just got noticeably louder. I mean, we felt like.
Unreasonably.
He says that they didn't change any controls. We don't really, but he and I have talked at length about that, and we really don't have a good answer. I don't wanna.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't speculate,
No.
I guess.
If I may make a suggestion, we can make changes to the additional conditions. And Mr. Powell, you brought up a fence or barrier. Would a fence and or barrier be acceptable language?
Myself, I would rather see it be both. Because that way, that'll allow us to put a fence in
Right.
with shrubbery or arborvitae on both sides.
So-
That way, both sides get the same.
So change it to a fence and and vegetation, or, I mean, is there a way that we can make this condition favorable for everybody?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Well, that's what I'm saying, we have that power to do that tonight. So, well,
I think if you take away the ability for the parties to have the discussion then, because once that's put in, there's no motivation for the applicants to do something, to work with us on this. I would rather see it get delayed 2 weeks. Let's come back, and in that time, we have some true discussion about what would be acceptable.
thank you, and I'll finish my points. So we could make it and/or or however we feel that we want to word this. The other thing is with the sound amplification, it seems like a 90 decibel within a 10 is an acceptable number, and it's the number that's being used here. So we could require that the Tudor House have not only what they already have, but a record-keeping system, some way that, like was shown here, some way that we could see the history of the decibel readings for events. And the purpose of that would be, this is a conditional use, and if they're not following the conditions that we set here, we're able to yank that away. And that's the power of having it as a conditional use. So if we're able to put that in there and then require them to have records of their, I'm sure they'd be able to do that. That way, if there is a problem, if there is a concern, there would be a record to either say, yes, we're complying, or no, we haven't been complying. And then that can be dealt with. Just my thoughts.
So the one thing I'd add to that though is this is conditional use for the building. This is not a conditional use for the existing use there with the tent. What we're looking at doing is making some modifications that allow him to do the building by putting some stipulations on the tent. So if he were to exceed those numbers under the conditional use, we can't pull what he's already doing.
I don't read this as being part of the building. I read this as being the property.
That's correct.
I agree.
Yeah, it's the entire grounds.
So we can be the right front, the tent, and the building.
And, you know, again, as Mr. Cotts pointed out, I would encourage you to add those provisions, make it a fence and a barrier, for to assume that 2 weeks from now the parties are going to come in and say, hey, we're fine with everything, and we've got an agreement to propose to you, and this is what the fence and the barrier is going to look like. That's not likely to happen. And I think if you add the fence and the barrier, if you put the 90 decibel limit inside the tent, all of which is exceeds what the current law provides, I just think those are manageable numbers. And as Mr. Cotts points out, this is a conditional use. And if they don't follow, then the use is withdrawn. But I don't know that there's a lot more that you can get. That's all I'm saying in terms of, and I'm not optimistic that the parties would walk in here in 2 weeks with an agreement on exactly what this fence is going to look like, and what are the barriers going to be, and where exactly is it going to be at. I think you put the requirement on there, and then you judge the requirement. If for some reason it's not a significant or suitable fence and barrier, then again they're violating the conditional use. But I think the trade needs to move down the tracks. That's all.
So my concern here is one, I don't, in full reality, I don't expect the two parties to meet and come back with a resolution in 2 weeks. I honestly don't. I do think that residents are expecting us to kind of do something along this path. And I think we owe our due diligence to look at a few different things a little more closely. Mr. Angeletti, what does 2 weeks do to the schedule of the building?
It's already extremely compressed right now. I know Tim will be back in town Saturday. The quickest we can sit down and do something, I think we're okay with tabling it and getting right on something, but that puts us right up against, these proceedings are already putting us right up against it, and that'll put us up against a lot more, so.
So my concern with putting a hard 90 on this number is that may not completely address the amplification when you start considering that decibel reading is going to be taken into account people as well. And I would hate to think that we're going to have a negative impact on the facility based on something that people are doing when the guy operating the facility is abiding by what we've said on him.
Good point.
So that's my concern.
And vice versa, 90 might be too loud.
Right, but no, does that sound like a reasonable approach?
I guess just want to make sure I understand what you're saying before I answer that. You're saying you can live with 2 weeks coming back before putting any conditions in place?
We would continue this meeting for 2 weeks from now, which would be the 16th?
Well, the next council meeting is the 15th.
Oh, yeah.
As well.
Because we bumped it out there. So yes, the 15th. We'd come back, we'd continue this meeting, we'd start it at 6 p.m. That'd give us time to do some due diligence, look into a couple different options. I'm really curious to see if there's a way we can monitor decibels at the amplification device itself and not take into account the crowd. Because once again, I don't want to pass judgment and penalize somebody for a single occurrence of an unruly crowd or something.
Yeah, maybe a way to just figure out what the volume needs to be on the equipment.
That was going to be another question. I'm wondering what's different from the first half of the summer to the second half of the summer, if anything, and see what happened there. And I would like, just my thoughts, I'd like to see both the arborvitae and the fence in some kind of configuration we can get with staff and look how that looks through there. And then, I don't know, is there a sound curtain on one side or what we have to help us beyond it? There's some things I think we can look at, and maybe we come back and we add those stipulations. Is everybody fine with that?
Yeah, sure, that's what we want to do.
You all right?
We're okay with that.
All right, so this, yeah, I'm thinking the 90, because he said, I'm good as long as that's 65 in my house.
Yeah,
I'm
we're not
good.
agreeing to 90 right now, so we're,
I mean, that's, I want to make sure, because I mean, I did live on the lake for about 7 years, on West
Right by the-
Channel, yeah, right by the upper deck, but my biggest complaint was in the, now we didn't have the winters, but was the middle of the night, the snowmobilers or the four-wheelers would come right up to my house. And I know that exceeded 65. So I want to try to make sure that they're held accountable, but they're not held accountable for yahoos that are 2 o'clock in the morning or whatever, 10 o'clock in the morning.
luckily the ice doesn't get very thick anymore, and the snowmobiles go in the water.
Exactly. No, what I think we'd like to, I would like to have a little bit of time. Just to,
We do appreciate all the attention that,
Perfect.
guys have given us. I really appreciate it. You know, so.
Would it be helpful for you if we sent you a photograph with a pro forma fence line that we had provided to opposing counsel that just said, this might work for us? You're not gonna make a decision on it, but we're happy to give it to you.
We would consider it, but if we could, I'd like to see that formalized report too from your guys' source. If you get that through Mr. Sugar and send out to us. But I think it'd just be helpful if we could actually expand that out and look at it.
I just want to say one thing. We had an incident this summer. We had a classical orchestra playing. They were on the upper part up by the house. And they were, I don't know what the decimal were, because we didn't check it. But they were playing, it was violin, viola, a nice group. Anyhow, the boats came by and made so much noise that you couldn't hear the orchestra playing. But, you know, those kind of incidents you're gonna run into in anything you have at the Tudor House, because you're on the lakes. And I don't know if it's somebody just trying to be funny or
We had
what.
a council meeting like that as well. Yeah, we
Okay.
couldn't hear our council meeting, get somebody out the room.
Yeah, so, I mean, there's those incidents you have to take into consideration too when you're thinking the decibels.
All right. So with that, we'll continue this meeting to the 15th of January at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to start our committee meetings. Mr. Cox, the Finance Committee.
Thank you. We will open a finance committee meeting at 7:52. Those will take a second. Keep the ball order so we can proceed.
Thank you very much.
That's quite some. Mr. Cox.
We'll open a finance committee meeting at 7:53. Our first resolution will be resolution 25R01, a resolution authorizing New Franklin to enter into a 3-year agreement with Julian Grubb for the gap conversion of the city's annual financial report and declaring an emergency. We've been using Julian Grubb for this service since 2014. First of all, Ms. Cook, could you explain gap conversion?
Sure, government accounting principles, generally accepted accounting principles is basically our system, the way that governments do that, it's on a cash basis. And this puts it on in the accrual basis. It also sets it up in our financial reports the way you would if you had a regular business with an accounting firm.
Okay. And this contract would be for $10,100 for each year of the 3-year contract, which is a $400 savings.
Yes, because if we just did it for 1 year, it would be $1,500. We paid, I think last time we had them set up for a 3-year, and it was $9,000 a year for 3 years. So it has gone up a little bit. But if we put in for the 3-year, lock them in for the 3 years, then it's $10,100 each year. And as you said, we've used them since 2014. We asked the auditor's office for recommendations for somebody to do our GAAP conversion. And though they were one of the ones they highly recommended, so that's why we went with them in the first place.
Okay. Obviously, with your excellent history of reports or audits, they do a pretty good job of getting you ready for that.
They do. On our end, it's making sure that we've done all the things that we have so that that report comes out right.
Excellent. Any questions, comments? Comfortable waiving 3 on this? Yep. Thank you. We will ask to waive the 3. And then we'll move on to resolution 25R02. A resolution authorizing modifications to the 2024 annual operating appropriation budget and declaring an emergency. This is for fiscal year 2024. For streets insurance, we're going to lower it $2,512.50. Police equipment down $54,574 and 58 cents, and income tax collection fees up $3,428.90. Any comments on this?
Basically, for the streets and the police, it's basically the difference needed to bring our appropriations in line due to the recent certificate of estimated resources, which showed the actual tax collection versus what the previous ones were, the numbers that they gave us. So this is kind of the difference to get us where we're supposed to be appropriation-wise for the year. And then the income tax collection fees are based on the amount collected, obviously, and that has consistently gone up. So this is the kind of the overage for that.
Comments, questions? Comfortable waiving 3? And we will close the Finance Committee meeting at 7:56.
All right. Thank you for that. One thing I wanted to do before we got into our normal meeting is last month we did not do a Citizen of the Month. And that was because the folks were actually doing 2 this time. It's a husband and wife. They were unable to make it during December due to work conflicts. But our Citizen of the Month for this month is going to be Harry and Christina Patterson. And this is for all their work with Friends and Tents. I don't know if you guys know much about Friends and Tents, but it's not just a New Franklin organization. They reach out countywide. And they basically help people who have exhausted resources, living on the street, living in undesirable conditions, or what may have become normal conditions to these people. This started out as an effort where they were doing a coat drive. And in the process of doing a coat drive, they were out delivering coats. They come across some people living in abandoned houses. At that point, that's where this kind of got started, where they wanted to do additional things to help these people out. We started taking them food, started getting them additional resources, and that was kind of the whole process that got the Friends and Tents started. It started off as an operation out of their homes. It has since migrated to a building. They have leased space now. Both Harry and Christine live in New Franklin, obviously. They've been here for 12 years. And they've got kids in the Manchester School District. So if I could have Harry and Christina come up.
Sweater. Thank you.
They say, let's get the picture there. You know, they say that they judge a society by how the society deals with the least of their members. And these are folks that don't get a lot of help. And it's for you to just voluntarily take your time and make the effort for outreach for, you see, nobody plans their life that way. Nobody starts out in kindergarten and says, I'm going to end up sleeping in a tent.
Right.
So blessings to you for what you're doing. Yeah.
Just-
Anything you want to say?
Just kind of an experience I had with them. My daughter had gone to the Subway over in Coventry Plaza, and there was a guy that had a dog, and he basically had his sleeping bag and stuff on the side of the building. And she pulled over, she gave him a bag of dog food, and she started talking with him and stuff. This is last winter.
Yeah.
So it was cold, it was like November, December, and she comes home, she tells me about this. So then I instantly reach out to Harry, I'm like, hey, do you know about this guy? No, he doesn't know about him. I gave him some details about the guy and stuff. He goes, I'm gonna go out there right now. I'm like, well, stop by and get me, and we'll go out there. So we both flew out there. And it was very impressive. I mean, he knows how to talk with these people. He knows the challenges. He knows what they're going through. And he starts asking, what kind of resources do they have? Do you know these people? I can get in touch with them. What do you have for food? What do you have for sleeping bag? What do you have for clothing? And next thing I know, we're getting back in Harry's vehicle. We're going back to his location in Barberton. And we're gathering sleeping bags and tents and food and everything else. And we're coming back out. We gave this guy a whole grocery bag full of, a shopping cart full of stuff, just to get him to, sustain to the next day. And I think he ended up showing up at your guys' location. You guys got him set up in apartments and everything else.
Yeah, he is actually now in an apartment over in Ellen. He still comes by.
Yeah.
Even after me and Kevin went out there, our son kind of was helping him along too and helping keep him safe. He had diminished capacity a little bit. And Connor had helped him for a couple of weeks, and then we finally him working with another one of our networkers, Allison herself over here, is a great help to our organization. Since we moved to Barberton, she's a Barberton resident, and she's been a great help in helping gain resources to some of these people. I want to thank the council, Judy. We worked with Judy. Kevin has been, from the very beginning, he had monetarily donated his time. He helped Megan get the electric she needed over the building to be able to cook. And we didn't set out to be like, oh, we're going to start an organization. We set out to take a couple of goats, put them in a bridge over in Akron. And here we are 5 years later. And we don't just help people that are living in tents anymore. The ditches franchised here in New Franklin, in Barberton, all over Suffolk County. The economy over the last 4 years has done incredible things to people. I mean, we're not seeing the people that haven't showered in a week come in anymore. It's just now. We're seeing the housewives that are trying to figure out how they're going to feed their kids and pay their mortgage. And people like that. Because we run in Barberton, I don't know if you know Barberton very well. We're in the old St. Jude's Catholic Church, where the shrine was. Just as you get to the end of State Street there. And we're serving, how many?
We serve about 3,000 a year is our number for this last year. Actually, we added them up. We have a community room in the basement, and we serve 100 meals a month in the community room just in the basement. We have a cabinet that we have outside, and we have cameras on everything, so we can watch all night long, and it goes off all night. The people come and eat out of the cabinet. People that maybe are just scared to come inside during the day, or, but they know that we put sandwiches and stuff outside when we leave every day. So, yeah, the amount of people that we work with has quadrupled probably since we started this in 2019. So,
And for those people that want to donate, you can actually do more with $5 than we can. So any money that they can donate to you, or anything they can donate, clothes, food, whatever.
Yeah, we just partnered actually with Akron County Food Bank too, because we operated for 4 years without being partnered with them, just based on, our donors. We have fabulous donors and volunteers, but the need has just grown so much that it's really hard to get meat and it's really hard to get dairy things. So we can get those from the food bank at way less cost than going to the store to buy them now. So yeah, we can definitely stretch, $5 or $10 much further than somebody else because we have those partnerships now.
And you can visit their website at friendsintext.com.
Yep, definitely. And there's so many ways to donate with us. You can donate monetarily. You donate your time. Kevin's done both of those things. We have an Amazon wish list. If you just want to say, hey, well, you can go on the Amazon wish list. Say, okay, I'm going to send these couple of things to Friends in Text. And we always need volunteers. Always need volunteers. We work off of volunteers. Terry Hall, Glory Marsh, Miss Fran. These are women that are coming there on a regular, everyday basis. Kathy, they come there every day, the days that they can, totally to volunteer. Allison, who she's a school teacher by trade. She puts in more hours at Pitt than she does at the school. I mean, that's just, my wife the same way. All of us work day jobs, and we do what we can to do the behind the scenes thing. And we have people that volunteer to come in. And there's so many different ways to do it. Like I said, you go to the website, you can go on and donate, you can go to the wish list. And I want to touch on what Paul said. I had read an article by an anthropologist that said, they asked her, what was the beginning of civilization? And, people think, oh, it was the wheel, it was tools. She said something that I found to be profound. A healed femur bone was the beginning of civilization. Because that person that had that broken bone could not fend for themselves at all. They could not feed themselves, they couldn't keep themselves safe, they couldn't hunt, they couldn't gather. So somebody did all those things for them. And that was the beginning of civilization.
Amen.
And that goes to tell why we do what we do here. I can't walk by another, when me and Kevin went out there, we can't walk by another human being and say, pass judgment on that person because you're sleeping on the sidewalk. One thing I say in a lot of my talking events that I do, we're all one bad decision away from being like that. It may not be your decision, it could be somebody else's decision. Way, way up there. We know that. It can happen. So to pass judgment on these people, please don't do that. Anybody, please don't do that. It's, you don't have to give them your money, you don't have to interact with them, but don't be mean to them. Because the biggest thing that we find that homeless people and people on the streets want is to be recognized as a human.
Acknowledged.
Yeah, they want to be acknowledged as a person, and that's what they want. Kevin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do.
All right, with that, I'd like to call to order the City of New Franklin Council meeting for Wednesday, January 2nd. Can you please join me in the pledge?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kelly, if you call roll, please.
Mr. Cox?
Present.
Mr. Schaefer?
Present.
Mrs. Jones? Present. Mr. Powell?
Present.
Mr. Stiles?
Present.
Mr. Wolf?
Present.
Mr. Almond?
President.
Do I have a motion for the approval of the minutes for the regular scheduled meeting of December 18th?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second. You have a first and a second, Kelly?
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Public comments, anybody with anything to comment about, please address council. Do you have any comments? Once, seeing none. Kelly, resolution 25R, resolution 25R01.
A resolution authorizing New Franklin to enter into a 3-year agreement with Julian and Grubb for the gap conversion of the city's annual financial reports and declaring an emergency.
This resolution is assigned to the Finance Committee. We move to waive the 3 readings on Resolution 25R01.
Second.
We have a first and a second?
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
We move to adopt Resolution 25R01.
Second.
First and a second?
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Resolution passes 7-0. Kelly, resolution 25R02.
A resolution authorizing modifications to the 2024 annual operating appropriation budget and declaring an emergency.
This resolution is assigned to the Finance Committee. We move to waive the 3 readings on Resolution 25R02.
Second.
We have a first and a second?
Mr. Cobb?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
We move to adopt Resolution 25R02.
Second.
We have a first and a second?
Mr. Cobb?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Resolution passes 7-0. We're on to our favorite part of the
boy.
the mayor's report.
Here we go. All right, let's start with board appointments. It's that time of year. And we have 4 different boards that require attention. The first one I'm going to mention is the Personnel Advisory and Appeals Board. We have 3 full-time members. I think those are 5-year terms. And then we created a 1-year alternate position. This appointment is by council, and Susan Chapman did submit an application to continue to serve as an alternate on that board.
Should we vote on these separately, or?
Yeah, we'll go one by one, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah, so, I would recommend Susan Chapman to the alternate 1-year term on the Personnel Advisory and Appeals Board.
So moved.
I have a first and a second.
Second.
We have a first and a second, Kelly?
So we're voting Susan Chapman as a 1-year alternate to the Personnel Advisory and Appeals Board.
Yes.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
All right, next is the Board of Zoning Appeals. These are appointments by the mayor to be confirmed by council. And we have a 5-year term that is open. Ed Koslow was on that term. He did not ask to renew. And so I would recommend to council the appointment of Anthony Mattioli to the 5-year term on the BZA expiring 12/31/29.
So moved.
Second.
We have a first and a second?
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Next is, again, the BZA 1-year alternate term. Nick Oleknowitz has been kind enough to serve in that regard, but his schedule has become very busy. He did not ask to be reappointed. Eric Cooper did apply, and I would recommend the appointment of Eric Cooper for the 1-year term as alternate on the BZA that would expire 12/31/25.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
All right, next we come to the Planning and Zoning Commission. John Perdine has served admirably for a number of years. His 5-year term is up. He did submit an application to continue to serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I would recommend John Perdine for the 5-year term expiring 12/31/29 on Planning and Zoning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
We have a first and a second?
This is John, I'm sorry,
Perdine, Perdun,
for 5-year,
expires 12/31/29.
And that's planning and zoning.
Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Powell? Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Wolf? Mr.
Yes.
Almond?
Next, there's a 1-year alternate term that expired at the end of this last year, presently filled by Ayana Huey, and she has filed her request to continue to serve as alternate. She's done a very nice job. That is Ayana. Huey is Hughey, and I would recommend her appointment for the 1-year alternate term on Planning and Zoning. That would expire 12/31/25.
So moved.
Second.
First and second?
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones? Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Next, Parks and Recreation Board, Jody Holloway she's been the current president, and her 5-year term expired. She filed her application and her willingness to continue to serve. She's done a really nice job. She gives us a nice conduit to the Portage Lakes Advisory Council as well. She's very active with that association as well. And so I would recommend Jody Holloway for the 5-year term on the Parks Commission, expiring 12/31/29.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
And finally on Parks, one-year alternate, Larry Ray, Gramps, is invaluable.
He is
He's
terrific.
like a history book.
Uh-huh.
We're up at Sisler, and he's telling us, well, anyway, he's served as alternate in the past, thank you. And I would recommend and he's indicated he filed his application to continue to serve. I would recommend the appointment of Larry Ray for the 1-year alternate on the Parks Commission that would expire 12/31/25.
So moved.
Second.
First and second?
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Thank you very much. The,
Mr. Mayor, before we
I'm sorry.
continue, can I just say that I really appreciated the opportunity to meet with the candidates a couple of weeks ago. That was invaluable. And it made me feel like I can make an educated vote on that, so I appreciate that.
well, and it really started with council and the suggestion of making sure that we advertised and give people the opportunity to express an interest in serving. So it's, I think, a happy ending. And again, a good protocol to follow in the future. All right, our federal projects are moving down the track. And by that I mean the ones that are significantly federally funded. And the first of those is the water project to get the water over to the ODNR Visitor Center. It'll also be available for St. Luke's. It'll be available for the Tudor House. In any event, since it's federal money, it's very complex. And among the things that are required, there's an intense environmental study. And some of you are probably familiar with this. And so we engaged experts to assist us through that. And we came out the other side of that. Finally, we got what's known as a categorical exclusion was granted to that project, and that permits us to continue to go forward. The work plan has been submitted. At this point, we wait for EPA to give us the final approval. We go through grants.gov to, they call it the application, all of the funds are there, and this is the $950,000 or so. So to keep that moving on the very tight line that ODNR requires, they'd like us to have that in the ground by in April, and that can happen. So to that end, we have advertised for bids, and the bids close on January 8th, and then we'll go through the review process of that with the review team. And obviously we're working hand in hand with Aqua on this. And then we also have to engage a construction and inspection firm. And we've closed the request for the RFPs on that for January 10th. So we'll get these. We probably will not have the recommendation, the scoring for the contractor until probably Monday of council week. We expect that we'll have that probably on the 13th. So you'll be getting a late resolution from me on both of those, recommending, it's lowest and best, and recommending that the contract go to whoever is lowest and best. And then also the same thing with the construction management. So I just want to give you a heads up. It's going to be important that we will, that we move that along because I think we actually gave them in the proposal a February 1st start work day. No surprises, Aqua's been through this forever, and they're going to help us sift through the proposals in terms of who they will work with, and same thing with construction management. So I'll get that info to you as quickly as I can. Sewer project eventually will be on the same route, but a little bit slower on that one in terms of getting this categorical exclusion, but I expect that'll happen.
What exactly is that, Paul?
I'm sorry, what is that?
What exactly?
Yeah, well, what it means is that you don't have to go through the full environmental review. that they take a look, and it has to do with whether it's previously disturbed land is the criteria. Is where the lines are going in, if it's, you know, if they're going in along lines that have previously been disturbed, as opposed to, well, for instance, you can't take trees down, okay? So, if we meet that requirement, it looks like we will. We're optimistic we will on that one as well. So probably February or so, we'll be going through that same process. We'll be going out for bid on that.
I apologize, I just didn't.
No, that's, these guys, you know, when you get on the, you know, oh, you need the Cat X, you need the Cat X, I say, what? So we learn it as we go. All right. OHM has completed their presentation, or they're prepared to do a presentation on the Sisler complex. And we've targeted that for what would be the Parks Commission meeting. They meet on the third Tuesdays. So that's going to be Thursday. I did that on the email too. But Sharon coming. Tuesday, January 21st at 6:30. And we believe we can do that in this room. There'll be about 5 boards up there. They'll do a presentation. If you haven't seen any of it, it's I don't know what the right, I was going to say dynamic, scary. No, when you look at it, it's like, well, the whole price tag on it is millions of dollars. I mean, we're never suggesting that we're ready to do all of this, and we don't even know if we want to do all of this, but we said, hey, if we wanted to do it, where would this go, where would that go, where would this go? So that's what we're going to see. And then we'll have an opportunity for the community to weigh in on this and say, okay, which of these components make sense? What would you like to see? And then we'll also try to reach a point where we prioritize some of these. Okay, what makes sense? What happens first? And then we talk about dedicating resources to those. So it's really a beautiful package they put together of what that can be up there. So that's going to be January 21st, 6:30, right here in this room. Summit Soil and Water, to continue to be compliant with county guidelines in this regard, they asked us, and they're wonderful people over there, and I try to share their info whatever I can. Sandy Barbic and her team. So they have asked us to remind everybody that the stormwater theme for 2025 is watershed. Our watershed and outreach staff are here to assist you. We now have a very user-friendly volunteer stream monitoring program for residents to become involved. There's a wide spectrum to try to preserve the water quality, which is what they're about. So we will continue to celebrate that we're asked to announce this at our January meeting, and so we have. We're going to enjoy Watershed here, and we'll give you more information as we go down the road on that one. That's all I got.
Thank you. Finance report, Sue?
I really don't have too much that's new. We are so busy. And there is just one of me. And a lot to be done, so one week I'm trying to get the books in shape, and the other week I'm doing payroll or human resources or whatever else needs to be done. So I'm a little busy. But if you need anything, let us know. But we're coming to a month, full of deadlines, which we are hoping that we can meet everything exactly the way we should. But it's gonna take a lot of time, and I've already put in a lot of time at home on my computer. So I expect that will continue to take place until we get all to the end of January and hit all these deadlines. But if you need anything, let us know. But we have our heads down, and we're working hard.
So on the transfer from the parks to the general fund for the repayment of the pickleball courts, we've had, 3 of those so far?
2 or 3. I think we did a double one.
I think it's the third. I can give you that.
Yeah, I was just wondering how many more we have to go until that's.
Quite a few.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to go back and do that.
I'll give you that.
Quite a
Next
bit.
week. I've got it in the next room. I can tell you what that is.
I just don't know it off the top of my head.
Any old business?
I have old business.
Okay.
I want to remind everyone that we're going to do the farmer's market again this year. And I think we're going to expand it. So stay tuned. We'll have more information next meeting.
Any other old business? Seeing none, any new business?
Just like to give a shout out to New Franklin Police Department. I actually was at my shop on New Year's Day, and one of the officers drove by and seen some unfamiliar cars in the drive, and they reached out to make sure everything was okay, just because they were so observant. They know what cars should be there and what cars should not be there. So they always do an excellent job. Just wanted to say thank you.
That's true too. You do a great job.
Any other new business? All right, any public comments or questions that were raised during the meeting? Seeing none? We have a need for an executive session to consider the employment of a public employee. Do I have a motion to enter executive session?
I'll make a motion to.
Motion, I'll second.
Okay, first and second, go.
Mr. Cox?
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Stiles?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Almond?
Yes.
Okay, we're going to enter executive session. No decisions will be made in our next council meeting, so it'll be January 15th at 6 p.m.